Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. This is Lori Smith on Blog Talk Radio. It is 6 o'clock here in the morning, Monday morning, May the 9th. This is One Child Abuse Survivor to Another. We're on for 30 minutes. It's a live internet streaming radio broadcast from blogtalkradio.com. And chat room open. I did pop the link in there to the next portion of this web pages that I wanted to look at from Robert Burney, looking at inner child work and boundaries and all kinds of stuff from healing.about.com. And his website pages, his website's called Joy to You and Me, Robert Burney. So it's good stuff, and I hope everybody's getting something out of it. I know I am. And, I just want to keep on taking a look at some of this stuff. He's got a lot of web pages there. So if you go to the sitemap on that link, if you actually scroll down and you go to the sitemap, you can see that he's got a whole lot of stuff there. It's great stuff. So thanks, everybody, for tuning in. I appreciate it. And, I'm not a counselor or therapist. I'm just a private citizen paying to do my own blog talk shows, and I just wanted to be one more voice speaking out against abuse and, talking about the issues surrounding abuse, and especially for adult survivors. There's people that are talking about this stuff, but not very many, and because it's uncomfortable for many people. I don't find it uncomfortable to talk about. That's why I'm okay to do this, but some people find it very uncomfortable if they haven't really talked a whole lot about their own issues or their own past, and if they've suffered from abuse, child abuse and whatnot. And I just, you have to listen at your own discretion, because ultimately it is your discretion. I'm talking about abuse, and it's a very sensitive subject, so it's okay for me to talk about and listen to, but maybe, you have to know what's good for you to listen to. So make sure you're making the right decision for yourself when you're listening to my shows. I put a discretionary note on all of my shows, and I just think it's important that people pay attention to that. Young people under the age of 18, you need to have permission to listen to my shows, because there's a lot of adult content on my shows. And I think young people should be protected at all times. And the Canada Regional Director for Dreamcatchers for Abused Children, we're standing up to fight to save children's lives. So if you're under the age of 18, make sure you have an adult listen to the show with you, so that they can help you make a decision whether you should be listening or not, right? Age appropriately. So we'll get right into this, and I just appreciate everybody for taking the time to tune into all of my shows. I do a lot of shows, and it's hard to keep up with them all, even for me. So I know, for people to tune in all the time, I just don't know. It'd be hard to keep up with. So I appreciate everybody who is taking the time to listen to what I have to say. So I want to look at this next section here of Robert Burney's website, and he's got great info here. He's a codependency therapist, Robert Burney, Burney, and he's got these web pages called Joy to You and Me. And he's a codependency therapist, a spiritual teacher, author of a book called Codependence, The Dance of Wounded Souls, which I would really like to get a hold of. And he's got some excerpts from his book here, but he's also written some stuff in his web pages. And it's just great. This next particular section is called Co-Creation Through Conscious Internal Boundaries. And he says here, we must start recognizing our powerlessness over this disease of codependence. As long as we did not know we had a choice, we did not have one. If we never knew how to say no, then we never really said yes. And these are the quotes from his book here. He says, I needed to learn how to set boundaries within, both emotionally and mentally, by integrating spiritual truth into my process. Because, quote unquote, I feel like a failure does not mean that is the truth. The spiritual truth is that failure is an opportunity for growth. And he says, this is what enlightenment and consciousness raising are all about, owning our power to be a co-creator of our lives by changing our relationship with ourselves. We can change the way we think. We need to detach from our wounded self in order to allow our spiritual self to guide us. And he says, as long as we are judging and shaming ourselves, we are feeding back into the disease. We are feeding the dragon within that is eating the life out of us. Codependence is a disease that feeds on itself. It is self-perpetuating. That's interesting what he has to say there. Codependence is something that I didn't know a whole lot about, and I had to actually, on these shows here, I don't know, it must have been I don't know if it was the winter or when, but I did take a huge look at codependency, and I don't know, we probably spent weeks and weeks on it, just taking a look at codependency, and because I didn't know a whole lot about codependency. I'd heard people talking about it, and, never really understood what it really meant to be codependent or to have these codependency type behaviors. And so I'm glad that I did look into it, because it is quite interesting to see what happens to families and to people who have this, who have these issues of being codependent. It's almost like, for me, the main message that I got out of it for myself was that people who, for instance, if I was codependent, I wouldn't be able to to be happy with my own life, and I would be trying to get my needs met through somebody else, and that it would never really be about trying to get myself a good life. It'd be always about trying to control somebody else just so I can meet my needs through them. And my family was completely codependent, and they still are. There's a few that are left, right? So internal boundaries, the key to spiritual integration and emotional balance. This is what I want to look at next year. It's actually the next section on his site map, right? So we'll just keep going. Internal boundaries, the key to spiritual integration and emotional balance. Loving internal boundaries can allow us to achieve some integration and balance in our relationships and our life experience. So Robert Burney says, I needed to learn how to set boundaries within, both emotionally and mentally, by by integrating spiritual truth into my process, because I feel like a failure does not mean that is the truth. The spiritual truth is that failure is an opportunity for growth. I can set a boundary with my emotions by not buying into the illusion that what I am feeling is who I am. I can set a boundary intellectually by telling that part of my mind that is judging and shaming me to shut up, because that is my disease lying to me. I can feel and release the emotional pain energy at the same time I am telling myself the truth by not buying into the shame and judgment. It's interesting what he says there. That's I didn't really realize that's kind of a boundary thing. I mean, it's these things where these internal shame and judgments that come from our internal toxic or that toxic parent, or that critical parent voice that he was talking about in his other pages there that we looked at last week. And these voices that would judge us and shame us inside of our head and say whatever they're saying to us, what I mean? Like for him it says, I feel like a failure, but by setting boundaries we can learn that we don't have to listen to that voice. We don't have to, because it's a lie. And so just to feed into it and say, just agree with it, this internal. My mother, like I talk about this a lot on my shows. Anybody who's listened to my past shows knows that, my mother used to call me a whore and a slut and all this stuff. And I was 10 years old, so 8, 9, 10 years old. And so, I don't know, I wasn't, I didn't even really know what the meaning of those words meant. And, later on, of course, I found out. And it's kind of I was thinking, to me that's such a lie, because I wasn't, obviously, at that age, and I never was actually my whole life. And so it was a big lie. She was just trying to hurt me, right? But those comments that she made stayed with me my whole life, and because they're just burned on the inside of me, right? They're just burned on the inside of my brain. And for me, to agree with them really would just be to be feeding into that whole toxic, shame and judgment from that critical parent voice that's continually telling us whatever it's telling us, So for me to buy into that and be like, I guess I am just a whore, I'm just a slut, that's ridiculous, right? I knew that at the time when my mother was telling me these things that I wasn't that, and I knew that later when I actually realized what they meant for sure, then I knew that wasn't true. So for me to buy into that now would be really totally unhealthy. Those voices are there. It doesn't mean that I pay much attention to them, because those are just memories, right? And for me to buy into it, those are lies. And my mother just told those to me to hurt me, because that's what she likes to call everybody names. So it wasn't just me. And she was just calling everybody the worst names she could think of, right? Yeah, so that's just how she operated, And so, I've learned obviously since I was adult to not pay attention to that. But then there's other things that my mother told me that I hung on to and actually bought into, right? Which is that I'm worthless, I'm no good, things like this that I thought could have been a possibility. I knew there was no way I was a whore and a slut, right? Just not my personality type, you know what I mean? Because of the abuse, because of the physical and sexual abuse, and because of watching all the sexual abuse between my parents, especially from my dad to my mom. The idea that I would ever be a whore and a slut is just completely just wouldn't happen for me. I was just totally non-sexual because of all that stuff, right? So I didn't want to have anything to do with that stuff, right? So for the longest time. So that's the thing. I knew that was just a lie, just a bunch of garbage. But this other stuff, you're no good, you're worthless, you're just a piece of garbage, let's just say, or a piece of shit, right? That's what she loved to call me. And so, you buy into some of these things. I actually bought into that, and I think because it was easier for me to buy into that one than the other stuff. I was like, maybe I am worthless. Maybe I am just a useless piece of you know what. Maybe I am just garbage, right? After you hear it enough, as a child growing up, you hear that again, you hear it again, and, all the way through the teen years, you keep hearing that, and then even into your adulthood, you might hear it here and there, and, you start to buy into it. And all we're doing by doing that is feeding into this, like he says here, this disease, right? It's the disease lying to us. Really, that had absolutely nothing. For me to believe that now is just ridiculous. Of course I'm worth something, and of course I'm not stupid. You know what I mean? And of course I'm worth something. It's absolutely ridiculous what people do to people to hurt them, but they do. And then if we listen to those voices, all we're doing is buying into that by allowing that to just continue and recirculate through our brain all the time. And of course those voices, that's just memories, right? And I don't have to pay any attention to those. So I like what Robert Burney says here. He's like, I can set a boundary, I can set a boundary intellectually by telling that part of my mind that is judging and shaming me to shut up. I like what he says there, because that is my disease lying to me. So you can just tell him to shut up. And that's what I do now. I don't pay any attention to that stuff now. And the minute I start feeling like that, it's real easy to feel that way if things are going bad. If things are going good in your life, it's real easy to feel good, But when things are going bad, all of a sudden, people who have experienced that kind of stuff, all of a sudden those voices can really kind of come back and cause problems. And, that happens to me quite a bit because I generally have something going on in my life that's pretty harsh. It's just never, my life is just not, no one's life is an easy road. But I know there's people out there who have a little bit easier road. And, some of us have a lot of trouble in our lives for whatever reason. And, we have to learn how to deal with things and learn how to roll with it. But the thing is for me to just allow this stuff to come back and cause me to feel like, oh, I'm not worth it, I'm just worthless, and I'm just stupid, just because I'm having financial difficulties or because I'm having a hard time getting a job, all of a sudden I feel like, okay, I'm just worthless, I'm just stupid. But if I listen to that, then I'm just feeding into that lie, feeding into that shame and judgment from somebody else that really was put on me out of anger and hatred, really had nothing to do with me. So I can't find that because it was all garbage and it was all lies, right? I totally am worth it, and I totally am not at all those things that my mother said I was, right? So I can't buy into that lie. So we have to be careful not to do that. So I like what he has to say here. He says we need to own that we have the power to choose where to focus our mind, and we can consciously start viewing ourselves from the witness perspective. So he talks about that quite a bit. Consciously start viewing ourselves from the witness perspective. We all do this anyway, but we learn to watch ourselves from a place of judgment and shame. So he says it is time to fire the judge, our critical parent, and choose to replace that judge with our higher self, who is a loving parent. So we're supposed to fire the judge, our critical parent, and choose to replace that judge with our higher self, who is a loving parent. That's what I'm trying to do. That's what I'm working on. Is the weeding out that critical parent voice and that critical parent within me, and replacing it with something so much better. So things are much better for me now than they used to be. Let me tell you that. But I've actually been working on this for 4 years. So that's the thing. You know what I mean? It's not like this happened overnight. And I still have days that are hard. I have periods of time during the day that can be hard. Any day. It doesn't matter. People in their lives. I would say, people are just not unscathed by something that will cause them to have a bad day. You know what I mean? And it doesn't matter whether they're abused or not. People have bad days. People have hard times, and so we have to learn that we have to learn to grab onto those good moments when we can and really appreciate them, right? And when the other stuff comes up, we need to learn from it. I think that's why I like what he had to say there when he said back there when he says that we can really learn from this kind of stuff, and we really need to take it as an opportunity. Like when something is a failure and something failed that we tried, like let's say a job, you know what I mean? Let's say we can't seem to get a job. We just need to see it as an opportunity for growth, and I think that's a really healthy way to look at things. And I'm really, over the last few years, because I'm getting older now, right? I'm starting to see that this stuff, that's just the way it works, right? It is an opportunity for growth, but only if we choose to see it that way. For years and years I didn't see stuff like that, but now I'm getting older and I'm starting to realize that this life is really, it's just what it is. I have to accept it. Excuse me, my voice is terrible this morning. But we have to accept these things and come to terms with our life. And at some point, we have to be happy about something, because otherwise, we'll spend it miserable and trying to live up to someone else's expectations and trying to live up to what the world sees as successful and the world sees as that you're worth it and that you're worthy of being here. I mean, who's to judge that, right? If we feel we are, then we are, right? And really, who cares what the world thinks? Really, that's what I say. And just learning to go with it, right? I mean, so many things could be going wrong with a person right at any given time. You know what I mean? And the thing is like, I think about people around the world who are suffering, who have no opportunity, for anything. They have no help, period. Like, there's people around the world, I mean, people in parts of the I don't know what you even call it now, the Soviet Republic or whatever you want to call it. All those countries over there are a mess. People, in parts of Asia, Southeast Asia, these people, they don't even have a hope for a job. They have no jobs. They don't even have a hope for a job. They just sit around in tents trying to collect water so they can drink it and trying to get a little scrap of food. And not only that, but probably half of them or 3/4 of them probably were abused as children. And they probably don't even care because they're just trying to survive, you know what I mean? And it's pretty harsh. I sit there, I think about people around the world who are suffering and, who have it so much worse than I do. And I sit and I think, well, I can't just be miserable about everything all the time, because, I have to be thankful for what I have. And we do have to embrace some of that. I think it's very important too, because it's way too easy for me as a survivor of child abuse to sit around and pout and feel bad because, my parents didn't love me and they beat me up, and, my brother sexually abused me and now I'm miserable. And it's way too easy for me to just fall into that funk of, woe is me, right? Crying out like a little baby all the time, me. Well, that's what my mother did, right? And that's why my mother did what she did. My mother was one of those people that was just so distraught by what her mother did to her and what her family went through because of her mother, my grandmother, who was an abusive, horrible woman, who should have been arrested and sent to some sort of prison or something. I don't know. She was a horrible woman. And, so my mother was like, that's what my mother did, and that's why she ruined her life and she ruined all of ours as children, right? Because she was always crying the blues, me, what about me, And she was one of these people that could not find joy in anything. She couldn't find peace. She couldn't find joy. She couldn't find joy in her children. She couldn't find joy in her life. She couldn't find joy with her husband. And of course not, because my dad was the biggest a-hole on the planet and still is today. He has the nerve to call me last night. We just love you, Lo, and we're praying for you, and your sister misses you, and all of this shit. I'd rather him just be honest and say, look, I totally screwed up your life. I totally ruined your mother's life since I met her. I'm really sorry, but he just plays the whole thing all the time, and because he's a born again Christian, he thinks he's just the most wonderful man in the world, and he's a horrible, horrible man, and I just don't even want to talk to him. But it's just sad because part of me wants to fall for that BS again, right? Because that's what we've always been doing, is falling for his garbage our whole life. But he's just a miserable old guy, and I just don't want anything to do with him. But the thing is like, that's what my mother did. She couldn't find one good thing to be happy about, not one thing, right? And so she was doing that whole thing, me, what about me, crying out. So see, I can't do that. I have to be able to find happiness in something, and I have to be able to find joy in something. I have to be able to look at this life and say, man, this is worth it. I'm worth it. You know what I mean? And I need to sometimes pull myself up, and shake off the dust and say, I got to keep going, and I cannot, spend too much time wallowing around in my own pity party, because that's a big waste of time. That's what my mother did her whole life, and ruined our lives because of it. And so, that's a cycle. It's a cycle of extremely, I don't know what you even want to call that, psychosis or something, or some type of, inability to be happy with life. I mean, my mother was diagnosed manic depressive, and 2 of my brothers killed themselves. So, people in my family just following suit, right? Had we been brought up by normal, decent, loving parents, I think we would have had a chance, to not be the way that we are as adults, like my siblings. But the thing is, when you're brought up with these psychotic people, what are you supposed to do? Then we have to go and change the way we look. And so what I decided I was going to do was try to do the exact opposite of what my parents did, because I realized that my parents had made some serious errors and serious mistakes. You know what I mean, in the way that they dealt with their family, with the way that they dealt with each other, and the way that they handled this whole situation with their children. And I thought, okay, I'm going to do the exact opposite of what they did, right? So I mean, it has gotten me somewhere. At least I try not to behave like them. But sometimes I don't recognize it. See, and that's the problem with this boundaries, internal boundaries, and codependency and stuff. Is sometimes if you're grown up and you're brought up in this stuff and you spend your whole life in it, you sometimes don't recognize these behaviors. So for me to sit around in my own pity party, oh, woe is me, you know, I was just, you know, hey, things are going wrong. Let me tell you, in my life right now, things are not going right. And I'm sitting there thinking, you know, sometimes it's hard because I'm on my own. So sometimes I'm sitting here thinking, can I do this? Can I do this? I have to put my trust in, first of all, I have to put my trust in myself that I can do this. I'm a middle-aged 45-year-old woman who has skills. I've got lots of skills. There's no reason why I can't continue on to work and to keep going, you know. But it's real easy to let your mind take over, your emotions take over your situation and say, oh, I can't do it. I'm just worthless. See, these are the things that will come back to hit me as soon as something's going wrong, a job loss, or, you know, maybe I'm just not able to find a good job, or right now I'm having a hard time keeping the job I've got just because my sweetheart's in the hospital and I'm exhausted and I have to keep going back and forth to the hospital because he's sick. I mean, he's extremely sick. Like he's dying. He's terminally ill, right? And so, you know, I want to spend some time with him, for God's sakes. And it's like, you know, of course this whole situation is causing me to be upset. So I've taken some time off from work, a few days anyway. And I can't afford to take that time off. My bills will not allow it. I mean, I need every dime I can get, you know what I mean? And it's like, I have to put a trust into, first of all, God, because I'm a believer in God, so I do trust Him. And I also have to trust the fact that I can do this, you know, because I've been able to do it so far, so why not continue on? Why let something like this just throw me off? You know, my life has been hard anyway, so it's not like I haven't had to deal with things before. So this is where I think people as survivors of child abuse and survivors of abuse and stuff, and these people who have been mistreated in their lifetimes, you know, really taking it to heart. You know, we need to be very careful to not let this kind of stuff drag us down, because it's real easy that at these times, when things are going good and things are going right, you know, everything seems okay. But the minute something starts going bad, which quite often it does, whether it's a physical health issue, you know, or just feeling, or it's depression, or something will happen in our family that will cause us to be upset. You know, whether it's your children or family members, right, or friends, things happen, right, and all of a sudden then we're back down into the mud. You know, life sucks and look at me, poor me. Well, we can't go back there and keep doing that, right? And I think that's where we got to set up these boundaries, where we can't just keep letting our mind continue to judge and shame us. These are these old voices, these old critical parent ways of thinking, right? And if we're ever really going to be healthy, I really like what he has to say here. You know, we're going to have to tell ourselves, you know, that we are worth it. We have to set these boundaries and say no more. You know, I'm not allowing that critical parent voice to tell me that stuff anymore. I am worth it, and I'm capable of doing so much. And so I don't have to pay attention to that critical voice. You know, because that's really hard on people when, you know, you're already having a hard enough time with things going on in the world and hard finances, and could be any number of things, physical health, I mean, it does whatever it is. And then you got this critical voice, you know, from your childhood, this inner critical parent voice telling you you're worthless. And it just really you start to believe it. You start to buy into it, whatever that voice is telling you. And that's just garbage. We can't do that. We have to really try to tune those voices out and listen to our own loving, nurturing, caring voice, which tells us we can do it. And there's no reason why we can't. Everybody else is doing it. I mean, you see all these people out here, they've got problems too. Just because they weren't abused as children doesn't mean they don't have problems. I mean, there's tons and tons of people who were abused as children who have problems, and there's tons and tons of people who were not abused as children who have problems. So you can't get through this life without problems, right? But we just started behind the 8 ball. That's all. I like to look at it like that. People who have been abused were started behind the 8 ball. Now we have to work that much harder, right, to get where we want to go. But we also have something that a lot of people don't have, and that is the will to continue to survive. And you know, some of us were made to have to survive, you know, any way we could as children, and so we actually have a bit of something else that a lot of people don't have. And that is the courage and the strength to wake up every day and keep going, right? Whereas a lot of people haven't had to do that. So actually, we have these things, these strengths really from the abuse, which is really sad because I'd rather not have had them, right? So there you go. I would have rather been brought up in a nice, loving home and not have those strengths. But you know, that wasn't my choice, right? I mean, it's just like maybe some people say it was. Lots of people think that, you know, I mean, you want to get into spirituality, which we won't even talk about on this show. But the thing is some people say we did create that choice, but I don't believe that. But I just believe that we are who we are, and we had to suffer what we had to suffer at somebody else's hands because they chose to do that. It's plain and simple. Very sad. And so we have to learn how to deal with it. And there's no reason why we can't do that. You know, I mean, we just have to make sure we get some help first of all, right? In one way or another, right? Whatever help it is, you know, whether it's self-help or really relying on good friends. Just find some good friends that you can trust, or a therapist or counselor, whatever it is, right? Group support. But make sure you get some help and don't allow yourself to suffer on, because that's horrible. So I like what he has to say here about this setting boundaries, not letting these voices even talk to us. So we need to fire, he says, to fire the judge, our critical parent, and choose to replace that judge with our higher self, who is a loving parent. And we can intervene in our own process to help us be more loving to ourselves, right? So he says we need to take the shame and judgment out of the process on a personal level. It is vitally important to stop listening and giving power to that critical place within us that tells us that we are bad or wrong and shameful. That's so true. You know, because we're none of those things, right? I mean, this is absolutely ridiculous that people, including myself, would believe this, that we're bad, we're wrong, we're shameful, we're just worthless, you know. Why would we even believe those lies? That's garbage, you know. And so we need to be very careful that we don't believe and buy into that stuff. And that critical parent voice in our head is the disease lying to us. Any shaming, judgmental voice inside of us is the disease talking to us, and it is always lying. He says this disease of codependence is very adaptable, and it attacks us from all sides. The voices of the disease that are totally resistant to becoming involved in healing and recovery are the same voices that turn right around and tell us, using spiritual language, that we are not doing recovery good enough, that we're not doing it right. Right? It's always going to be something. You know, this voice will always keep us underneath and keep us down, right? That's what it's designed to do. You know, that critical inner parent, that critical inner toxic voice is always there to keep us down, right? You know, you start believing, hey, I can do it. I can make it. 6 months down the road, something else happens, and then you're like, oh, man, I'm just worthless. I'm just stupid, you know. And it's like, you didn't do that right. You know, you should have done better, right? And then, you know, then you stop buying into that, and then you start doing good again. 6 months later, you're back down into it because your voice is telling you, what's the matter with you? Why did you not do that right? You are just worthless and useless. You know, and so, you know, it's almost like it's just always continually trying to keep us down if that's part of our belief system. And that's, you know, that's why we have to change the way we feel. That's why we have to change the way we think about ourselves in order to really learn to love ourselves. And like, this is what I've done over the last 4 years, is really take mostly I'd say that's most of the work that I've done, is taking a look at myself and saying, you know what, I have to change the way I feel about myself, and I have to change the way I feel about this life, you know, because I grew up in hell. And so, I didn't want to continue this on as an adult because, I mean, that's ridiculous. So I thought, okay, how am I going to change this? So that's really what I've been doing for the last 4 years. It's working on getting rid of some of this negative stuff and really allowing positive stuff to come in my own thinking, in my own mind, and allowing myself to feel positive about myself and about my life and about who I am. You know, my spiritual, the spiritual part of me, you know, as well as the exterior part that everybody sees. I have to be okay with that, and I have to accept it, and I have to learn how to grow. You know, because I was not shown any of this stuff as a child. So we have to do this for ourselves. And some need help, right? So if you need help, you make sure you get help, right? Don't suffer on this. This is horrible for people to just be on their own, suffering alone. When the time is right, you'll know. And if you're listening to this and you're just not sure, you know, you'll know. And you just make sure you stick around. You know what I mean? Because things won't get better if you don't stick around. My two brothers didn't stick around, and it makes me sad every day because I'm like, why? You know, people tried to help them, and they would not accept help. And really, they refused it. They absolutely refused help. And so they're gone. They'll never have a chance to experience a good day like I know a good day, which is awesome. You know what I mean? Because I can see good things. I can see good things about this life and about this world. And I have good friends, and I've got good people in my life, and you know what I mean? Like, so things are maybe going wrong sometimes, but that doesn't mean it's all bad. You know what I mean? And we can learn to grow from this stuff, right? But we can't if we just give up. So that's what my big message is. Don't ever give up, right? Have a great day, everybody. We'll talk to you later. We'll be back on tonight and tomorrow morning. We'll just continue this on. But take care of yourselves. I'll be thinking about you. Have a good day.